come sit down. Trying to command attention. Thank you. Ladies, let's get started so that we can hear Miss Leah. So good to see everybody. All right, so as we're getting started, there are two groups of clipboards. I've got one for this side, one for that side. One of them is for funeral meals. The other is Becky needs you to check the directory so she can get them to the printers. And then also we have, you guys on this side, y'all looking at me? I only have one of these clipboards. So after it goes on this side, if somebody can just, I'll put it on the other side. And this is for visiting shut-ins. So as we get started, if everybody would please turn down their phones, myself included. Nobody wants to hear Dateline again. Just saying. Gilda is obviously out of town, and this morning we have the pleasure of Leah Williams sharing her story with us. Bet you're wondering what's on my face, my head. So I met Leah, what, 3 years ago? 2.5? She is my neighbor. She is the most extraordinary lady, wonderful neighbor to have. And this hat is an example. I told her I had to go to a derby party. I am not that girl. And not an hour later, she showed up with, hey, I've got this hat. You want to do something with it? And that's just the kind of lady that she is. She is very intentional, very giving. I don't even know how to get this off. Let's just say it. That's just one example of the many, many blessings that her friendship has brought me in this life. And I'm very excited for y'all to get to know her better. So if y'all would please bow your heads as I pray for her and her lesson. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much. You love us so deeply in so many ways that we're not even aware of. In the friendships, in the cooler weather, just for a moment, and just the fellowship and the love that we have in this room. And Lord, I just pray over Leah. She's such an amazing person, an amazing friend, a godly woman, a great wife. I just pray that if there's nerves, that you calm them. But I am excited to get to hear what she has to share with us today, Lord. And as always, Lord Jesus, thank you. Thank you for the sacrifice that you've given us. And I pray that in those moments, day to day, however big or however small, if we have an opportunity to share that blessing of grace and love, that we seize it. It's in your holy name I pray. Amen. So we have to do this.
By the way, if the directory thing goes by, if you weren't here last week, what I need you to do is just check yours if it's correct, so that I can kind of make sure that everybody's in the check.
Can I just make real quick the shut-in list? If you'll just, there's not much space, but if you'll please just get your name in there. And sometimes for some reason, I left some names on there. So if that's not what you want, please just mark your name out and add it somewhere else. Okay, I hope. Okay, just send a card. What's mine?
We can't hear you back here.
Oh, well, just periodically, would you mind just call them or send a card and watch for their birthday and holidays? I hope every little space is filled, because this has been a project. And I will try to get more birthdays filled in, but it's a project. So thank you very much. Okay.
Morning.
Morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a teacher voice, so I kind of thought you might be able to. As Jackie was saying last week, when you start putting this together, you think, oh my goodness, you don't talk about yourself. And being the historian, I wanted it in a timeline, and that got too complicated. So I hope you enjoy this, ladies. My husband and I have been blessed by having godly parents. And I remember going to ACU and them telling you, if you had parents who went to church, then your Christianity is not your own. And at the time I thought, whoa, how is that true? And then I learned they didn't know us. I'm sure they were trying to help us to encourage the foundation that needed to be there. But Laura asked me what was my verse, and it's Luke 18:1, and it's pray and never give up. And determination is a wonderful thing for all people, although some people call it stubbornness, but we'll talk about that some other time. Genesis 2:15 says, God took the man and set him down in the Garden of Eden to work the ground and keep it in order. And it wasn't long after that that he brought a woman into the picture, because we know who really keeps things in order. Pinon, New Mexico, which is a little bitty place about 25 miles from Weed, which some of y'all go to the Sacramento camps. Well, Pinon is where I grew up, and Ann and Jane and Hilton grew up on a ranch. And Laverne Patterson is going to be mentioned in here because she has a connection to Pinon, New Mexico as well. Mom and Dad had a ranch in the southeastern section of the state that's 100 miles north of El Paso and 99 miles south of Roswell, New Mexico. The climate is dry. It wasn't a Garden of Eden, but it was our home. The Guadalupe Mountain Ridge, where you see Signal Peak at the end of Texas, looks out over the mountains where our ranch was. And it's an excellent place to grow sheep, except for coyotes. And coyotes are predators, and we have our own opinion about coyotes, but we worked hard to raise sheep. And as a honor for my dad, his percentage of lambs per ewe was usually about 104, 105%, which, considering all those coyote predators, that's pretty amazing. I have 5 siblings, twin girls passed at birth or shortly following birth, and losing the girls indicated that there was a medical condition that the next 2, Jane and Hilton, were born in El Paso. Although Ann thinks that the twins were born in El Paso, but I don't know, and wasn't there. And Ann and I were born in Roswell, and the ranch was our life. The ranch was purchased in 1940 after Mother and Daddy married in 1939. And when the ranch was purchased, it had been severely overgrazed, which for the stewards of the land that my parents were, that was just a sin. And it took Daddy many, many years to regrow the healthy, protein-rich grama grass that is good for sheep, and to remove the weeds and noxious plants that grow when the healthy grasses are removed. And you add a drought to that, so there was very little rain, and needle grass took over. And one of my first memories as a little girl, I must have been 3 or 4, and the older sister, who's 6 years older than I am, would take a propane torch and burn the needles off of cob cactus, for the animals to eat because there was so little grass. And I was young enough and small enough that I had a wet paper or tow sack that I knocked out the fires under the cactus that the propane torch would create. And we had to be careful because the cows were ready to eat that green, juicy stuff, and they would come and try to step on us. So we always had chickens. for eggs and a milk cow, usually a Jersey cow, that gave rich, creamy milk, which introduced me to the pleasures of cooking with cream. And even today, I have cream in my refrigerator. And back in the back, there's a picture of the house Larry and I lived in, and a blanket made by our older sister of the clothes that Mother and Daddy wore when they were working. And there is a board that says welcome. And it was one of the boards that was under the cow that Daddy milked every morning, twice, and every evening. So that's very precious to me. We shelled peas and beans and froze corn and butchered cows and sheep and hogs and chickens yearly. We knew how to change a flat tire. We knew where the oil went in the car. We knew how to start a kickstart Maytag washer because we didn't have electricity until 1957. And if we hadn't been to town in a long, long time, we even knew how to make soap out of lye and ashes, which ruined your clothes. But occasionally you do what you have to do. When electricity did come to the ranch, we had a lightning storm, and after all of us had left home, it burned the house down. And we were the last ones on the line, so that's the house that was lucky enough to be there. But who knew that would bring Larry and I to New Mexico? Now, one of the important things about our life on the ranch was that we were self-employed and there was no health insurance. Well, Mother had a genetic condition called preeclampsia, which claimed the life of the firstborns of her sisters and her twin girls. And it made the three of us girls have to be high-risk pregnancies, and they watched us very carefully. And along with the preeclampsia, Mother also developed cancer. And it spread to her breast about the age of 25 or 26. And she received treatment for 2 years in Temple, Texas. And during this time, Hilton and Jane lived with neighbors, Dulce and Lynn, who were Laverne's friends. And Ann lived with Mother's sister, Bess, in Roswell for 2 to 4 years. We couldn't quite figure that one out. On one of the rare times that Mother could come home from Temple, I returned to Temple with her. The cancer doctors were not pleased that she was pregnant because of all the medications she had taken and wanted to abort me, and Mother refused. So I have a personal feeling toward abortion even today. The ranch payment was skipped for 2 years while Mother was recovering. And when Daddy had to renegotiate terms at the bank, he would bring me. And I crawled around under the banker's desk and probably talked to him because I was known for that. At that early age, I learned, though, about spending plans, cost cutting, and financial prudence. And, you know, that young, it's still with me today. You know, the Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over you coming and going, both now and forever. And that was kind of the thought that Psalms 121, 7 through 8 had. But you know, during all of those really difficult times, He was there. The next part's on romance and education. And in our family, it was very closely tied. Be careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. And that's Ephesians 5, 15 through 16. Neither Mom nor Dad graduated from high school. Dad had what we would term ADHD today. Back then, they just called him naughty because he couldn't learn to read like the children who stayed in school, which tells you what happened to him. His math skills, however, were phenomenal. Mother was very smart and an excellent student. Her mother died when she was 12 and her younger sister was 10. Mom and her sister kept their dairy and truck farm going for 2 years without either parent. The older sisters would come by to help as they could, but they too were young marrieds and had little children. Some lecherous old men began to come around their farm at night. Mother said she ran faster than they did, but her younger sister was not as athletic. And the younger sister had 2 or 3 babies before she was 18. The first son was adopted by the oldest of Mother's sisters and reared as her son, my cousin Jerry. The next 2 sons disappeared as far as we knew. Mother, however, met Dad as she was running out of Roswell High on her way to work at Woolsworth, which was kind of unusual. They didn't have DECA programs then. And Dad had gone to school to pick up his sister to take her to his parents' ranch or townhome because they had to go to school. Little did she know that Dad's older brothers, being sort of connivers and wanted a cook out in camp, bet him he couldn't find a wife. And he did. And the romance began. Their life was tough, but the ranch was home, which was so appealing to my mother, as was my dad. And her very first task was to teach Daddy to read. What if they shared? As Mom and Dad helped tame the West, they fenced 6 ranches because neighbors helped each other and set about breeding their most fruitful herd of sheep with as much grass as God chose to rain upon. We always were doing projects to improve the ranch, improve water shortage, and to learn methods of food preparation or preservation. And long story shortened, after Mother's bout with cancer, coupled with her lifelong love of learning, New Mexico was made a state in 1912, but part of becoming a state was you had to have so many schools. Well, the school at Pinon closed because they had too few students. And all the older 3 children had attended Pinon School. The ranch was in Chaves County, so the Merritt children had the option of attending school in Roswell, Penasco, or Weed. Mother opted to drive us, no bus service back then, to Hope, when Hilton and Jane and Ann attended Hope, until it was consolidated into Artesia. And so all 4 of us are alumni of Artesia High School. And the night I graduated, after they bought a house in Artesia, I was the last one, so they had sold the house and we were out of town as soon as I got that diploma. And our pickup looked like a sharecropper's delight. And Daddy parked it right in front of the football stadium. And, you know, being a teenager, oh my goodness. But I graduated, and all 4 of us did from there. And Hilton and Jane and I attended Abilene Christian College, now university, and attended Oklahoma Christian College for a year or two. Mother was so happy that her children all became college graduates. Later, Hilton became Dr. Hilton Merritt, married to master's level counselor Avenel. Jane received 2 masters, as did her husband Jim, and doctors Ann and Dub Hannell, and then there's me. I just have a master's, and my husband just has an undergrad, but we did okay. All 12 of the grandkids are also college graduates, and this was a lifelong goal of my mother, which set us up, okay? Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. And if nothing else, the ranch taught us to work, and almost too much. When I was 6 weeks old, I began to go to school because Mother was driving the bus in those million miles. Mother fixed a bassinet behind the driver's seat of the car of the moment, and we began the trip to school with the older kids and Mom. Dad stayed on the ranch. In all the years of seeking an education, Mom drove seriously 1,000,000 miles and wore out many, many cars. Dad was an educational widower, okay, until June of 1967. We would come home on the weekends, we would go home during the summers, but then we always went back to school. I can get into a car even today and fall asleep immediately, as taught by my mother. There would be less fussing if everyone was asleep. After Hope consolidated into Artesia, we would leave the ranch at 4 a.m. on Monday morning, drive to Artesia. We would go to school, participate in the extracurricular activities that ran during the week only, and then at 4 o'clock on Friday, we returned to the ranch. Dad usually had a delicious pot of beef macaroni with tomatoes. It's the only thing he knew how to cook. But we were so hungry by the time we got there, it was delicious. And that was our schedule for 12 years. When Dad dropped me off at ACC, he said, "You've got a year to catch a husband." Daddy swore later, he didn't say that, but I remember being appalled. I thought I was there to graduate as soon as possible. I didn't realize there was another part. Sadie Hawkins weekend, 3 of us had dates all together. My best friend had a date with this fella named Larry Williams, El Dorado, Arkansas. One date led to many, and we married June 29th of 1968 in the downtown church of Pinon. Y'all been ever to Pinon, that would get a snicker. Pinon has a Church of Christ, a Baptist church, a post office, and a store. Larry's parents were the kindest, most accepting people I think I've ever met. I was blessed to be their daughter-in-law. And before I can begin the journey of Larry and Leah Williams, I have to tell you a bit of a history about Larry. When he was 11, Larry was burned in a gasoline fire. Larry and a neighborhood boy were painting their bats together, cleaning the bats with gasoline on a day when the humidity was heavy and made a layer of moisture above where they were standing. A neighbor lady was burning her trash and it caused the gasoline to ignite. The neighbor boy threw the burning gas on Larry, who received 60% third-degree burns about his torso and down his legs. It happened on his dad's birthday, March 19th, 1959. Also, as it happened then, they had no insurance because at that time, if you had insurance and you changed policies, there was one day when they could not overlap, and that was the day he was burned. So he was in the local hospital for 6 months, and then he went home. He attended school in the 7th grade, which was the next grade, but it was very, very difficult for him. And I knew all of this when we married. I had no idea of the influence it would have, but my role as a counselor was needed long before I was a counselor. And when he would tell me the stories about his life as a student, you know, my thought was, where was the counselor? Where was the one to help them have a learning plan to help this child through this? But they didn't have those at that time. So maybe that's part of why I became a counselor. Who knew? Whoever pursues righteousness and love finds love, life, prosperity, and honor. Proverbs 21:21. And Laura, that may be another favorite scripture. I have so many. Both of us were ready to become a couple. I finished college at ACU to become a vocational home ec teacher, and Larry graduated with a degree in industrial management. Larry worked as a school carpenter while at Abilene and knew most of the staff and all of the administrators because he worked in their offices building cabinets, replacing doors in all the dorms, built the stage at the Chapel Coliseum that's there even now, and helped the head of maintenance with whatever Mr. Ira Trantham wanted. Our second son is named Lee Ira in honor of Mr. Ira Trantham. I cleaned the department nursery school, the home ec nursery school, on work study and served as the food procurer for all the foods labs and worked really hard to balance our meager budget. While in class one day, Larry was working with a skill saw to finish a project for one of his classes when the saw nearly cut his thumb off. I rushed to the hospital to see blood all over his jeans, and the doctor who operated him, though, had just returned from working in Vietnam, and he was the one in a MASH unit and did things that normal surgeons had never seen before, and he patched Larry right up. And the thumb works fine now. And Mom and Dad had sold a bull out of sequence, which meant it was kind of free money, and had sent it to us 3 days before the accident. After graduation, Larry and I returned to El Dorado, Arkansas to work with Larry's dad in his business. Larry and Carl had a contracting business, and Lucas was born after my first year of teaching, and I took a leave of absence. Larry built nursing homes in Louisiana. The last year he did that, it was a record-breaking year for rainfall, which, if you've ever lived in Louisiana, you understand. They even opened the floodgates on the Mississippi River that had never been opened, and all of that beautiful farmland below there was flooded. Well, during this process, Larry turned a forklift over, unloading sheetrock for the job due to the soft, sandy soil. And that was about the time my parents' house burned in New Mexico. So Larry thought the desert sounded wonderful after all that rain. Larry and I loaded up, moved to Mexico when Lucas was 10 months old. Dad rebuilt their house on the ranch, built a house for a neighbor, and Lee was born in 1976 in Roswell. Mom and Dad moved to the new house, and we moved into the shared house at the upper ranch. Larry did odd jobs for neighboring ranchers and had a shop where people would stop by to have him fix things. But Lee had a lot of ear and allergy issues. Our goal was to take a load of firewood to town to sell every time we had to take him to the doctor. After depleting our resources seriously, we moved to Artesia for a job with health insurance. An ACU friend's dad was the head engineer at Marathon Oil Company and took Larry in. And we finally had insurance and benefits. We built 2 houses while living in Artesia. I had a private nursery school at home for 5 years. The first house was built because Lee's allergies required no carpet. The second house was out of town on 4 acres at the end of Century Road, which is where our friends who had started Deans Incorporated had lived in houses that Larry built. I returned to teaching when our youngest son, Lee, entered the 2nd grade. The superintendent called and said, "Leah, are you ready to go?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to wait until my son's in 2nd grade. And he said, "He is in 2nd grade. He's in my wife's class." And I went, "Oh, I guess I am." And I retired in 2011 in time to be a Nana to my first grandchild, Avery. And Larry retired in 2012 from Deans Incorporated. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, Ecclesiastes 3:1, which is why no matter what happens to you, it's simply your season. Larry began having breathing difficulties in 1990. We began a round of doctor visits who knew Larry had something, but it wasn't responding to the asthma meds. He carried portable oxygen with him 24/7. And when he was finally given a test to determine if he had asthma and failed it, we started looking beyond our usual circle of medical care. At National Jewish in Denver, he was diagnosed with tracheal bronchial malacia, which means he has soft tubes in his lungs from the burn. It is a condition that has no treatment, but requires smart awareness and lots of rest. And in 2013, Larry had improved to the point that he no longer had to carry the oxygen machine 24/7. He only has it when he sleeps. We'd visited many, many doctors in many lovely locations and know more about all of this than we ever thought a school teacher and an electrician would ever know. But what we learned and developed, that when Larry had chronic lymphatic leukemia in 2015, more trips to the doctor and to Lubbock for watch and wait. After retiring, I started working in our pecan orchard. I would mow each morning, relishing no phones to answer, no angry, disappointed parents to counsel, no bells scheduled to meet. The unfortunate part came, however, when I was bitten by a meningitis-infected fly or mosquito. I spent 2 months in Covenant over here, comatose, and 6 weeks of trust point, getting my brain, vision, and balance repaired. We moved to Roswell to have a one-level home and to be closer to the granddaughters. Now, because of Mother's health history, I always took yearly mammograms, but in August 2020, one of the tests came up hot. Thanks to COVID, the New Mexico Cancer Center was limited to patients who were already being treated. My biopsy came in December 2020, revealing invasive ductal carcinoma, which is the bad sort. I had a double mastectomy in January of 21, and treatment began in late January of 21 until August 13th of 2021. Radiation then started in September and ended October 13th. Larry and I stayed with Ann and Dub for 6 months, which gives you a clue to how kind Dub is to have a sister-in-law and a brother-in-law around that long, and how it never crossed my mind that I couldn't stay there. So thank you, Leah. We were blessed by selling our house in Roswell at a record price, purchased a house in Lubbock at a reasonable price with cash. At the same time, another house sold in Artesia so we could move with the least drama possible, although I still have some boxes that have not been unpacked. Later, Laura asked if I played sports in high school. At that time, New Mexico only had intramural girls' sports, had to be ladies. Female athletes moved to Texas to play sports. The first time I heard the phrase Title IX was when I wanted to become a history teacher at Evelyn Christian. The ACC advisor said, only coaches teach history. And with Title I means all the lady coaches will be teaching history too. And you won't have a chance for being hired. But he was wrong. And as water reflects the face, no one's life, so as the Christian's life reflects their heart. That's Proverbs 27:19, even though I mangled it. So why did all of these life events happen to God's children? Larry was baptized in 1958 at Camp Wildwood by Charles Coyle, who in the South, Charles Coyle is quite a fella, and he was. His home was a refuge for ministers who traveled the South, lots of good fellowship around their dining table, and lots of love shared every day with fellow believers. I was baptized in 1959 by a visiting minister on Mother's Day in the Havens Dirt Tank, which was the closest body of water. And yes, the bottom was slimy and gross. As believers, we never considered any of the hard times more than just life events to be dealt with in the manner expected by God, by his followers. God did help me to have good insurance, however, after seeing the difficulties both of our parents experienced because of having no insurance. And what were the biggest differences between us and other people of our age? Our parents were God seekers. My unchurched mother was baptized when I was maybe 18 months old. My brother said during the post-sermon call, Mother pushed him out of the row, handed me to him, and was baptized in Mayhill Church of Christ at about 1950 by Lloyd Ruckman. Larry's dad was a Christian from Mississippi. His mother was a Southern lady from Mississippi, was a Southern Baptist. She was baptized into the Church of Christ before Larry was born. They loved the Bible and they loved the fellowship of fellow Christians. Both homes were full of believers and seekers and and disciples. And what fellowships did we attend? In Abilene, we went to the college church, usually the early service because we had things to do. In El Dorado, Arkansas, we attended both College Avenue Church of Christ and the Hillsborough Church. And in Pinon, we went to the Church of Christ there. When we moved to Artesia, we went to the older church where my parents had gone when we were students there. And they really had become so old that I was on the funeral committee, and I had events every week. And finally, we went to Hermosa Drive. And then when we moved to Roswell, we attended the Country Club Road church, and I found community Bible study. Now remember, I've been a Bible school teacher since I was about 10, and I've gone to Bible school all my life, and I went to Evelyn Christian, had fabulous teachers, taught Bible school, started Cradle Roll when I was in El Dorado. And community Bible study, which was attended by ladies from all faiths, was spectacular for me. And I hope if you ever have the opportunity, that you will go to those places, because they can be spiritually uplifting. And then when we moved to Lubbock, I came here to Greenlawn. And if I had any words of wisdom, life is messy, faith is eternal, and love is many faceted, even when not attractive. You never give up on your God, your children, or your spouse, and you never underestimate the power of a prayerful nap. Bless you, ladies, for listening to my story. I certainly hope it's not too long. I timed it. I don't think it was. Beverly,